Hello and welcome to the Apologetics 315 podcast with your hosts Brian Auten and Chad Gross. Join us for conversations and interviews on the topics of apologetics, evangelism, and the Christian worldview.
We're ready to believe you.
Hello, welcome to the Apologetics 315 podcast. I'm your host, Brian Auten, and with me is my co-host, Chad Gross. Hello, Chad. And this is a reboot of the Apologetics 315 Interviews podcast, and we're changing it up. We're not it's not just me anymore, but it's a great friend of mine, Chad Gross from Truthbomb Apologetics, and we're going to be talking apologetics and probably all kinds of other things along the way. So as we get started, we'll just introduce ourselves. Chad, where are you from? What do you do?
So you're asking me where am I from originally? Is that what you're... So essentially, I am from, I live in Hagerstown, Maryland right now. And I have lived there for the past, over about 20 years. And so I'm from Hagerstown, Maryland, and I've been doing apologetics. I got saved when I was 25. I'm 44 now. Part of my coming to Christ was looking into the evidence of the resurrection in the New Testament documents. And so I've really been on an exploration of learning and apologetics and philosophy since then. We started Truthbomb just out of a ministry at church, seeing a need. No one else was really doing apologetics, and it started as a blog and teaching classes, and it's just grown from there. And we continue to do that. And so that's a little bit about me.
Cool.
Anything else you'd like to know that I perhaps left out?
Oh, we'll get into that in a minute. Now we've been friends since ever, apologetically. Since the blog started. I think maybe Apologetics 315. What did it start? Maybe 2007-ish. And so that's a long time in internet years because things have changed so much. You know, for me at that time, it was like there were no resources. It was like, wow, look, I found some audio of this great talk, and it was like, we have to, put this all in one spot so people can find it. And now there's a glut of resources. It seems, maybe that's a weird word to say. There's an abundance, a cornucopia of resources. And so I'm glad that Apologetics 315 kind of maybe helped along the way. And so we met, like 2008 it must have been, or something like that. And it was like, I actually want to talk to Chad and see, talk to him on the phone. Do you remember that first phone call?
Oh, yeah, I do. Absolutely. And I remember you started leaving encouraging comments on Truthbomb.
Oh, that's right.
And then there was, I think it was either on Apologetics 315 or Truthbomb, but you and I were discussing issue with a person on one of the blogs, and you were like, "Hey, can I give you a call?" And it just took off from there. But yeah, I absolutely remember the first call, and it was so much fun to be able. It's weird when you're in apologetics, and maybe some of the listeners can relate to this. When you're in apologetics, sometimes you feel like you're in your own island and on your own island. And when you're talking to other Christians, it's almost as if, have you ever heard of this? And of course, a lot of them are, oh, I'm glad you're into that.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I'm in the chess club. Want to play?
Exactly. I heard one speaker once say that being the apologetics person in your church is kind of being like the Star Trek convention person at your church.
Right.
So it was so refreshing. I remember to find somebody who was like-minded, who had the same like goals and passions. And I also remember, it's kind of fun to think about now, but how many goals and dreams we had and how different, those paths kind of took. Whereas what we were actually shooting for as to what they look like now is just being, really regular jobs, regular dads, and things like that. Yeah. So,
I remember that first phone call. It was like, wow, we could have talked forever. What a perfect podcast host. Exactly. Because there were so many things that was like, oh, and this and this and that. And it would we could have talked an hour on every subject and only scratched the surface, because at the time, as you said, it seemed like finding someone that was like-minded was an impossibility. I don't know how it would be nowadays if I was just starting out in it, but resources would be easy to find. Probably detracting resources from atheism or skepticism would be just as easy to find. But it was like I got off the phone, and after it was 2 hours or something, and I was like going to my wife saying, wow, this guy Chad is amazing. He knows all this stuff I know about, and so every phone call from, that point or interaction was always a real encouragement and valued. And
same,
it's really helpful to have input to other people if you're in conversations with challenging content. Wow, this guy's really good at off into the weeds on this skepticism or whatever. And, having those sorts of conversations on the internet, they can be real drags sometimes, real time sappers, and they can be disheartening in a way. But at the same time, going through them can be encouraging and a learning experience, because you start researching realms that you never imagined before. So,
if we go back to that time, it was right before Apologetics 315 kind of took off, and you were interviewing top philosophers, theologians, apologists. I remember getting texts and emails. Well, I guess it was emails at the time from you saying things like, "You're never going to guess who I got," and you would tell me people like Richard Swinburne, and I would think to myself, "What? Like, how is he getting Richard Swinburne of all people?" So, and then I remember that it kind of progressed from that to I was listening to podcasts from other apologists, and these were notable apologists who were speaking and writing and everything. And they started saying things like, "Oh yeah, that's on Apologetics 315," or "Check out Brian Auten's Apologetics 315. He's doing a great job." And so it was kind of like it was growing, and it was going, and it was going, and it was like the hot spot. I mean, I remember Apologetics 315, man, I was getting on there every day. That was one of the first things I did when I got on the internet. And then you kind of just poof, it was kind of gone, right?
Well, it kind of feels like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I know from your perspective and me knowing kind of the background, it wasn't that, but I could see how to, listeners, it seemed kind of like, where did that go? So yeah. I thought it might be interesting for listeners to kind of hear a bit of your journey there.
Yeah, well, let's do that. The elephant in the room. The thing was, it was like getting to be like 150 interviews. In a way, it kind of felt like, boy, who do I interview next? And there was a lot of ideas, and there was a lot of other things that were being produced on the website, like read-along programs and, a lot of like
essay projects.
Like creating content and stuff, which was great. The funny thing was, as I see the progression, there's so many different factors. There's no one thing. When I first started getting into apologetics, there was just a kid on the way. You know what I mean? Now there's three. And then there were three. And so there's the kid factor. There's the factor of probably the biggest change that happened around 2012 was my father-in-law's business needed some help. And the people, or the person who was running it before, says, bye-bye. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try to step in and help because he's asked me to help a little bit. And at the time it was like, well, this will be a good supplemental income. I was trying to, make ends meet, so to speak, with maybe two kids at the time. And it was a welcome thing to work a couple days with my father-in-law, running his business or helping him run the business. He was also having a little bit of health issues at the time, and I was only working part-time. At the time, I was only working part-time as the church admin, thinking, well, this will give me more time with to do apologetics, plus the graphic design job I was doing before. Everyone was like getting canned, and I thought, well, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to just be waiting for the chopping block. So I kind of, maybe I was like, all right, opportunity to serve at the church, felt led to do that, did that. Felt led to help with the business, did that, prayed about it, consulted people, felt it was the right thing to do, both for my family and just at the time. The thing that was different was, as when I was a graphic designer, I could work and listen to podcasts all day long. So it was like, how does he find all this content or consume all this? Well, I would work, normal hours doing graphic design, and I listened to podcasts all day. Every break, I was reading books. Every drive and commute, I'd carpool, so I'd be reading books. So it was like I could read a book a week, write all kinds of content. Every break, I would use optimally. Then I thought, okay, well, this family business thing, it's going to require 40 hours. Oh, 40 hours, I did that before, no problem. So, it was like, can you help run the thing a little bit? Sure. And then my father-in-law had, like, the first day I went into work full time, he went into the hospital, which turned into like a quintuple bypass months later. So imagine not knowing anything about a business, thrown in head for, the deep end, so to speak, and not having him there in the office, but like going to his house. Hey, can you sign these documents while he's in bed, recovering? And phoning him multiple times, like, hey, how does this work? What's the story here? So there was the mental and emotional bandwidth was just completely, it's like, 10 people watching Netflix at once in a house, and you're trying to like watch a YouTube video. It ain't going to happen,
Right.
So, or record a podcast. I tried. And so I tried to sustain both, and I was getting really burned out. It was to the point where I kind of like dreaded, oh, now I got to try to, time to make the donuts. It was kind of like a dread thing. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this out of feeling like I have to keep creating content at the same level, because I was completely burned out that way. And if I'm really honest, I was getting a little bit burned out apologetically, so to speak. I felt like, nowadays, that if you sit in front of the computer all day and they'll tell you, hey, you need to less screen time, you're driving your brain nuts. Well, try listening to 40 hours a week of podcasts at two times speed and read that many books. It was like, okay, I've heard it all. I felt like just consumed everything, and I felt myself getting a little bit cynical and jaded or whatever. I don't know what the word would be there, but just like, I don't have time. I can't do this right. I feel like I'm doing it out of obligation. I feel like I'm doing it out of a real weariness, and I wasn't doing it from an overflow. And so really kind of a crisis in my own self, like, and then, I'm a perfectionist and, there's this thing like where this blog started, and I started posting something every day. Right. And then it was one of those things like,
I remember.
Don't break the chain. Oh man. So I had a buffer of 30 posts ahead, and, interviews way out in the front. And now you have that mentality where you're just like, want to do everything perfect. And then, all this stress in a new job, you have no clue. And, health issues with father-in-law, moving into a no home, third kid on the way. I'm not trying to like play a violin here, like, oh, what was me? I couldn't do it. It became overwhelming. And so the chain broke, and I started posting sporadically, and it was like, okay, I can't pressure myself to do this. And then it was like, then I just got out of the rhythm, and it was like, well, maybe it's just run its course. Maybe I had a good run there, So there was all kinds of factors. Maybe there was personal, spiritual factors. Maybe there was being worn out. Maybe there was stress. I can't really pin it down, and I've been trying to pin it down for a while. But all I know is that in praying not long ago, and getting to the point where I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to do? What are the skills you've given me? You know, how do you want to use me? Kind of like that broken point again of, here I am, Lord, use me.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, what do I want to do? I like podcasting. I love that. I don't particularly like running a blog and churning out content. And I don't think I need to do that anymore. Like, the content is out there, and if you want to find it, you'll find it. Yeah. But I love talking about apologetics, and I love interacting with the ideas. And I think I still have something to say. If I might continue just a moment more.
Absolutely.
I want to hear from you too.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's like, before on the podcast, I never spoke from a place of like what I thought about stuff. It was always, I'm not an expert. I'm not credentialed. I'm not a scholar or a scientist. What do I have to say?
Right, and that was part of the part of your goal. I remember, because we would talk about interviews sometimes in depth. You would even I remember getting emails and getting so excited when you would send me an email saying, "I'm interviewing so and so. You got any questions for them?" And I used to think, "Oh man, this is great." And but one of the things you said is that one of the goals was you wanted to get out of the way, and you just wanted to let them do the majority of the speaking. And I think you were able to do that. But one of the things I remember too about the interviews was how good the questions were, because you were obviously very studied. I remember it was either Habermas or JP Moreland. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember one of them even commenting and saying, "Wow, Brian, I typically don't get these levels of questions. You've obviously done your homework." And I think that's what the interviews were, is you doing your homework, you crafting some very careful questions that you knew listeners would want to hear answered, and then you kind of getting out of the way and just letting them talk.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That was the goal. I did think it served its purpose. That was the strength of that mindset. The strength of that mindset was that. The weakness of that mindset was, I think for a long time, it was like, well, who am I to say anything? What if I say something wrong? So there's a lot of like insecurity about who I was. You know, I don't have authority. If I say something, this is my opinion. So, you know, for the podcast listeners out there, anything we say here is just our opinion. We're not like these super scholars.
Right.
But if we're further along on the journey than you might learn something from us. But if you're further along in the journey than us, we'll probably learn something from your feedback, you know?
Absolutely.
And the other thing is that even if it doesn't matter where you are on your journey of learning or apologetics, simply having a different perspective. And so I just want to have conversations, because I get so excited. Like when we get off of the phone with you talking about apologetics, I'm like, yeah, let's take on the world, man. I'm going to read this whole book right now. You know,
I just got out Philosophical Foundations of a Christian Worldview. I'm reading that baby tonight.
Like page 2, formal logic. Oh dear.
I know. Put the coffee on, honey. Put the coffee on.
Honey, I'm learning symbolic logic. That's nice. Go back to bed. You ever see that meme where the wife is like laying in the bed and the husband's laying in the bed and they're both in thought, and the wife's like, he doesn't love me. He doesn't want to, maybe he's seeing another woman. And the man's thinking like, let's see, what did Habermas mean? What did planting mean? You know?
And, one of the things I remember too about a lot of our earlier conversations was how we had to learn really quickly that you don't inject logic and philosophical arguments into your marriage, and how I remember you telling me, because remember you went through that. I mean, I don't know how long it was, but it seems like at least a year, but I might have my timing off there, but you went through this really long stint of studying logic. You made that basic logic primer on Apologetics 315 that I still will recommend to people. And so you were telling me how you had to be really careful because you were realizing that you were using this in conversations with Judith, or you would be watching the news and somebody would, use an informal fallacy and how it would aggravate you. And so I remember us encouraging each other, you don't use syllogisms in arguments with your wife.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's like the learner's pitfalls of the learner. I think it doesn't
Right.
matter. It doesn't matter if you got it like, oh, I got a new skateboard. Then it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
talk about oh, honey, I learned how to kickflip.
Yes.
That's nice, and she's patting you on the head.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember in my household we actually had a not necessarily a rule, but it just became this understanding between Danielle and I that when I would get to the point where she was a little taxed, she would just be able to just give me this gentle look, and I would be like, "Okay, I got it," because I
yeah,
could just. I could just go on about it all day, but obviously, our wives need more than just that.
yeah. Well, I've kind of thought about this topic a little, and everybody. I think it just depends on who you're with, and whether it's a friend or it's your wife or husband or whatever. Um, I mean, some marriages is like they could talk about that and they're all happy and chipper, and it's like, yeah, um,
Yeah,
and then someone else would be like, well, something's wrong with my marriage. My wife doesn't want. No, it isn't. It's just different people, and so
exactly.
um, I guess it's being maybe a little bit self-aware of how you're coming across, how you're being received, and maybe just remember if something, being able to tell if something's hitting the mark or not. And okay,
Mhm.
well, they're not into this.
Well, I know with Danielle that what it is that she'll pick up an apologetics book every once in a while, or a C.S. Lewis book or something like that, and she enjoys engaging in those discussions. And for example, she's fascinated by the moral argument. She finds the
Mm-hmm.
moral argument to be the most persuasive. And so we'll have those conversations. But I think where you were sharing your struggle, I know where mine was, is it was almost constant
Yeah.
because I was immersing myself in it, and just everything seems so new and fresh. And you discover these things, and you can't imagine why everybody wouldn't want to talk about them all day long. And so for
Yeah.
me, it was she definitely had an interest in it, but at the same time, there were other things she wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had them conversations where it's like, hey, let's just talk about the weather for a change.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
suppose maybe my faults would have been I either want to go super deep or just goof around,
Right. There's
and that
no
can
in
be
between.
very
No in
problematic.
between.
So that's just
Yeah,
okay. Well, we'll save that for the marriage week on Apologetics 315.
exactly.
But
Exactly.
did we complete our topic? I suppose. Yeah, I guess that brings us to. I mean, the whole point of that question was the beginning of that bunny trail was why did the podcast stop? So the short answer is for a whole lot of factors. Um,
Life.
yeah, life, and and honestly, I guess there are seasons for things, and I think that that was sort of like, yeah, it was a great season, and then it changed for me in my life. Now I'm like, I was praying and felt like, I want to do some podcasting, but I don't want to be locked in to this previous format. Hi, this is Brian from Apologetics 315. Today's interview is with Chad Gross. And the purpose of this interview is to, I don't want it to be canned or scripted so if you're the listener right now, we're not reading this. This is unscripted.
We are not.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of our background. Do you have any hobbies?
Yeah. Well, obviously, reading is a big hobby. I enjoy. I collect spores, molds, and fungus. And
I'm gonna interrupt you right now and just say to the listeners that one of the common points between Chad and I is not just apologetics, but we speak in movie quotes. Now, it could be a lot of different movies, but the one that takes the full 90% of it is pretty much Ghostbusters
yes,
because why?
because it is the most quotable movie ever made, in my opinion. Yes. Yes. I love it. We both love it. What am I talking about?
Yes. So, talking about the goal for the podcast, I suppose this episode would be entitled something like Apologetics 315 podcast reboot. We're rebooting the podcast. It won't just be me interviewing one of the top scholars in the world, but it will be me and Chad. And we're going to be talking about whatever we want to talk about. And based upon what our interests are, it's going to be apologetics. It's going to be movie quotes, applied appropriately. And, maybe some cultural things, parenting when it comes to apologetics. But if we want to do an interview, we're going to bring people in to do interviews. So it's just much less formal, and but we're still want to engage with what's going on in culture, with maybe books that we want to read and things like that. So what do you think your biggest influences in apologetics have been?
Yeah, definitely. I think in the beginning, when I first started getting into it, it was interesting that I did have a pastor who was aware of apologetics and could tell that I had a lot of questions. So he directed me to Lee Strobel's works, which at the time, I think he had only published The Case for Christ and The Case for Faith. And The Case for the Creator came out shortly after, probably about 2 years into my walk. He also recommended C.S. Lewis to me. And I found Lewis's Mere Christianity helpful in the sense that I think Victor Rupert, philosopher Victor Rupert, he really gets Lewis right when he says that Lewis doesn't always develop his arguments exhaustively, but Lewis offers a lot of really good kind of lesson seeds. Mm-hmm. Or a lot of nuggets that can be built on. And I remember Lewis, through Mere Christianity, challenging me to think about things like morality, marriage, in ways that I had not. Marriage particularly was important, coming from a family where my parents divorced when I was 4, and then both parents divorced again when they remarried. And so those were really influential. But through Strobel's work, as listeners will probably know, Strobel interviews the top scholars in a lot of different fields. And so through Strobel's work, I was introduced to people like J.P. Moreland, William Lane Craig, and those two were definitely tremendous influences, particularly J.P. Moreland in regard to having a fully orbed Christian life, loving God with all your mind, heart, and soul. And then particularly Craig in just the sense of that idea of mere Christianity, and helping me to understand that I don't have to have every single doctrinal dispute figured out. It's really about being able to answer those big questions. And then those peripheral issues are, of course, important and well worth talking about, but they're not necessarily central. And so I would say, and then honestly, and I'm not just saying this for the purpose of the podcast, I would put you in there. One of the things that you really helped me with when we started was that I would have these long, laborious discussions with people in chats. And I remember you and I having phone conversations and email exchanges about how to best handle these people. And one of the things that you really helped me do is through asking a well-crafted question, or maybe picking out the central issue of, instead of having these long drawn-out discussions with a lot of times people who they really weren't interested in the first place. I mean, they were just trolling, to use an internet term. And so you were very influential in helping me think about kind of what's the core issue, and let's focus on that, instead of feeling like I needed to answer every single objection that this person brought up. And so I would definitely say those are some of the big influences. And then, obviously people nowadays that I'm influenced by vary among theologians and philosophers, but those are some of the bigger ones.
Mm. Yeah.
What about you, though?
I think what really got me into apologetics. I remember one thing that got you into apologetics that you told me about straight away. Do you want me to share it? Yeah.
So if you'll remember, you're going to know exactly what I'm going to say when I start. So there was this group of internet skeptics called the Rational Response Squad.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Is it okay to share this? Is this okay to share this?
Yeah. Well, do you want me to share?
Or do you want to share? Yeah. Why don't you share it?
Well, my version, true version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine's false, apparently.
I was, there's, I don't want to like expand the story too much.
Sure.
My background was more of a Pentecostal charismatic churches. And in a lot of that was street preaching and stuff, although it was a little bit charismatic and Pentecostal and not the best ways. Not a lot of critical thinking, not a lot of good hermeneutics in my background growing up, a lot of passion. One of the things I did when I was in a church was I started coming across these quotes by revivalists and like classic reformers and revivalists. And so I'm back when you had internet, like email lists and newsletters.
Yeah.
I made one, and it was like the daily revival quote. And I would send this out religiously, just like Apologetics 315, except I was sending out quotes from revivalists. And I was really focusing on, prayer and things like that, evangelism. And Ray Comfort happened to be a subscriber, and he loved them.
Wow.
And he would send me some quotes once in a while. And then he sent me a book. And it was like, God Has a Wonderful Plan for Your Life, was the title. And on the front of the book was like this guy getting stoned, a Christian getting stoned, basically in contradiction to the prosperity gospel. God has a wonderful plan for your life. He's going to shipwreck you and you're going to get, tortured and killed for the faith, that sort of thing.
If God has a wonderful plan for your life, Paul screwed up.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing was that book was a paradigm shift for where I was at that time. Now, I don't remember everything it said, and I'm not saying, hey, go out and buy this book. It's awesome. I don't even remember really, other than it shifted my thinking and started questioning stuff that I hadn't ever questioned before, because I was like, oh, God said it? Well, let's do it, And even though it might have been crazy, I would have kind of been down that road. So I became like a Ray Comfort follower in a way. And I have to say, in a very helpful way, I did a lot of street evangelism and like the way of the master sort of stuff. And so for a time, it was like, this is really great. And I adapted it as how I felt would work and stuff. So I was doing some evangelism in that sort of regard. And so during that time, like atheism started coming back on the scene, and there was a Rational Response Squad. And, thinking back, I'm like, I'm still this just naive, don't know anything about philosophy or logic or critical thinking or apologetics, really. It's just like zeal, evangelism. Oh, this is the way you evangelizing? This is the way the master. So let's do it. Not downplaying any of the good points and I love Ray Comfort and that sort of thing. But I heard that, the Rational Response Squad, Ray Comfort, and he's going to debate him on live TV. And this was like back then it was like, whoa, this is like a cage match. And I was just
with Kirk Cameron.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. With Kirk Cameron.
Oh man. And so I was waiting to watch this, and I although they were like heroes to me at that point, afterwards, It was just like, really? That's all our side had? This was embarrassing. Now, I didn't think like the Rational Response Squad won. I didn't think they had anything to say, but I just felt like surely there's got to be something a little bit more intellectually rigorous. And then I started searching for arguments for the existence of God and that sort of thing, and came across William Lane Craig. And it was like, my goodness, this is like, wow, there's a real world of academia. And these dudes, like, he has a PhD, not one. He's got two. He's got two masters. Like, okay, how many things can you get?
Right.
But it was like from that point on, was like consuming all this content from scholarly stuff. I didn't know there was a scholarly world, really. I just like the breakthrough for me was first finding hermeneutics and realizing there was a way to properly interpret scripture and not twist it to say whatever you want for some charismatic name it and claim it sort of crazy thing.
Yes.
I've heard preachers say stuff that'll turn you white.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So real wrath of God type stuff, cats and dogs living together.
Mass hysteria.
So what got me into apologetics was a lot of things, but one big factor was that debate with Ray Comfort and the Rational Response Squad. And then in doing evangelism, using apologetics in evangelism, coming over to Northern Ireland here, it was like, wow, people were having some serious, God questions beyond just like I had to engage with their questions. And the arguments for the existence of God, the reliability of Scripture were things that were coming up. So that was life-changing.
Yeah, because listeners might not know this, but even when Apologetics 315, just because of life, you continued your Reasonable Faith chapter is it still going?
Well, I call it on hiatus. It had been going for 9 years, and then this year was like lockdown.
Yeah.
So 9 years of doing Reasonable Faith chapter. Maybe we were the second chapter, the Northern Ireland Belfast chapter. So
it was pretty early.
When that came out, it was like, I'm on this, like white on rice.
Yes.
So that was all these are great times, but I'm like, let's forge ahead. Let's keep going and see what else the Lord has. So
you mentioned, as you were discussing how Apologetics 315 kind of evolved, if you will, and how the new job taking over for your father-in-law and how family played a part in that. And tell us a bit about your family, like about your wife and your kids, and what's it look like to be Brian Auten, the dad, and tell us a bit about that.
All right. Well, I'm in Northern Ireland. I'm a Michigan person originally, but ever since 18, I went to college, lived in California for a couple of years, went to the mission field for a couple of years in Malaysia, Kiev, lived in Ukraine, met Judith in Turkey, and we're doing mission stuff. So I was all into missions, and I knew that she was the one. So we got married, moved to Southern California. I wish when I was in Southern California, I knew that like this is the hotbed of Biola, and you got STR over there, and you got this, RTB, and like what? I was there, and it was all happening, and I didn't know.
Yeah, it seems like every conference will come up on my feed on Facebook or something, and I'll that looks cool. And prior COVID, you can kind of do it virtually now, but prior, everything I'd click on California. It's like I hate that place.
Yeah, well, it was cool place to live. After a while, everything sort of seemed plastic to us, and our church experience there came to an end. So we live in Northern Ireland. I had been doing all this media direction at a wannabe mega church, if you will, and that didn't go well as far as things at that church. And we came here, and the best fit was graphic design. And that's when I got all into the apologetics, because kind of alluding to many things here, but getting burned at a certain church experience, that there was a lot of recovery, and apologetics was like a recovery for me. And it was like being born again, in a sense of finding my Christian faith and finding it not just experientially or emotionally or with passion and expression, but with intellectual vigor and some like sustaining like foundation that had like a real full-orbed Christianity, as you say. So,
amen.
So being here nowadays, family life is, I live in the country, look out and I see lots of green. I see sheep and farmers. I go to work some days am importing containers from India and China and waiting for them. And sometimes I'm under a vehicle pulling out leaf springs. Sometimes I'm welding. Sometimes I'm using grinders, benders, blow torches, using lathes. So that's like workshop admin,
Wow.
import business, lots of sending out pallets of components to manufacturers and that sort of thing, sort of stuff that doesn't sound very glamorous, but there's a real sense of like, yeah, man, I'm getting my hands dirty. I come home and I need to take a shower and get the steel dust off me. So that's awesome. And my family life is, I've got 3 kids. I got 2 girls who are 13 and 11 at the time of this recording, and a boy who's 6. Me and my boy, we wrestle. We play Xbox and Star Wars. And my eldest daughter's way into like art and music, and my younger daughter, she's like organization freak, and like she's into sewing, and she's into tidiness, and she's like math, like super academic.
Does she get the tidiness from you or from Judith?
That'd be me. That would be me.
That'd be you. That's what I thought.
Yep. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on with 3 kids, and my wife's a teacher. She's working half time doing teaching, and she also does like she has her little cake bakery. Like she makes novelty specialty cakes. I don't say novelty cakes. If she listens to this, she'll be like, "What?" But no, she can make wedding cakes and special treats of all sorts. So we're having really great time in life, doing projects all the time and making tree houses, and she's riding horses and I'm shoveling what's left from the horses, you know.
Yes, I have that too. I get you.
Yeah, so
what do you and Judith like to do? If you let's say you have a date night and you don't have kids and you're able to go and do whatever you want. What do you guys usually find yourselves doing?
Oh man, there's a place called the Artisan Cookhouse and a little place called Carlingford or Portaferry, and it's just this amazing little restaurant. And there's been a lot of filming of the Game of Thrones over in Northern Ireland, so there's like all these little tourist spots with Sean Bean ate here, you know. when he was
he died,
when he was filming that one scene, he was in this chair. And so anyway, there's some great like small little really old buildings and restaurants we would like to go to. There's a lot of beautiful places in Northern Ireland, so you can have some nice food and really scenic views and stuff. So that would be probably ideal.
Yeah. And so do you find, I guess, last thing, do you find that apologetics connects with your kids? Like, does that come up in your parenting?
You know, for my older daughter, we would have a lot of discussions that would revolve around, well, when I say a lot of discussions, she would be one that I would have discussions with more. A lot of philosophical talks about, well, I don't want to throw topics out there because it sound really weird, you know,
right?
Because the listener would just ascribe what they think I mean by that. But we would talk a lot more philosophical things, things about spirituality and whatnot. It hasn't come up a lot with my younger 2, but I try to use opportunities I can to. There's never like straight apologetics with the kids. It's more like critical thinking and asking good questions. Well, what do you think he meant by that? It's more like worldview stuff a lot.
Yes.
What does this person believe? There's a lot of things that come up on TV or culture, and you're like, oh, you can see why this guy thinks this way. Why do you think he said that? And so there's a lot more of that sort of engaging with ideas and then trying to relate them back to Christian worldview perspective, and then just being a critical thinker. There hasn't been a lot of prove the existence of God, although we've talked, there's a lot of design talk, you know. I think that's the easiest thing to sort of point out because it's so everywhere. I'm real big on design being in everything and purpose being in everything, to the point where I'm like, show me something that isn't designed.
Yes.
So So when things come up, we just talk about it, but I don't really, indoctrinate them. It's sort of like the air, and it's the atmosphere of trying, just incorporating it,
I think if we teach, what I hear you saying is, if we teach our kids to think well, they're going to find themselves in a good place. I mean, and from a Christian perspective, if Jesus is the truth and we're teaching them to think well so they can discover truth, then we've done our job.
Yeah.
And that comes through, like you said, conversationally, and not necessarily sitting down and saying, premise one, everything that begins to exist as a cause. I mean, there's a time for that. But it's really going to come through. How does dad react when he sees the commercial with, the controversial topic in it? Or how does he think through that? Does he emote? Does he emote, and does he get upset, or does he, calmly reflect on it and think through it? And so, well, I think it's definitely great to catch up with you, and for those who've kind of faithfully listened to the podcast for so long, to kind of not only hear what we're going to be doing, but also to just kind of catch up with you and see where you've been. So thanks for filling us in on that.
Well, great. Thanks, Chad. Now we're reaching the end of our episode, so I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the new format. It's not all going to be the Brian Show, so don't worry. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Listen, if you've got comments or questions, or if you've got feedback for the show, we really do want to hear from you, because we want to incorporate your comments and feedback. So you can send emails to info@apologetics315.com. There's topics you want us to cover, some sort of person you want us to interview, bring back to the show. We will do it. We'll do it for you. Any topics you want us to cover. Now, the particular important links that we've discussed on the show today, we will post on apologetics315.com. But I also want to send you over to Chad's website. That's truthbomb.blogspot.com. Truthbomb Apologetics. So if you've enjoyed today's show, be sure to share it with others. This is Brian Auten
and Chad Gross
for the Apologetics 315 podcast, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
As Red Robin's voiceover artist, I'm here to explain Bottomless. How do I get across free refills on fries and drinks? Well, here goes. Bottomless at Red Robin means free unlimited refills on the fries and sides that come with every burger or entree. That means free refills on steak fries, sweet potato fries, Yukon kettle chips, garlic fries, broccoli, side salad, soft drinks, iced teas, freckled lemonades, and even root beer floats. Offer doesn't expire until your appetite does. Whew, nailed it.
Red Robin.
Yum. You don't own me.
Booking a room with 2 beds at a hotel isn't exactly your idea of a romantic getaway. Orbitz gets it. Visit orbitz.com/pride to find hotels that welcome you to travel as you are. Orbitz, travel as you are.
So